The survivors were a ghost crew, a handful of scientists, engineers, and soldiers who had touched the Horizon engine and somehow lived to tell the tale. Many were broken, their bodies frail, their minds shattered. All of them were haunted by what they'd seen, by the whispers from the other side. They gathered in a place as far from the desert as they could get, a rundown cabin nestled amongst pine trees, the scent of sap replacing the smell of ozone and fear. Keller, the lead scientist, now a man withered by his creation, trembled as he laid out the last, desperate plan. "We can stop it," he said, his voice a fragile whisper. "We can erase the engine before it ever existed." His assistant, Daniel Wu, a man whose youthful brilliance had been tarnished by terror, shook his head. "You mean, go back through the engine ourselves?" The idea was madness. "Yes," Keller confirmed, his eyes wide with a terrifying certainty. "Not to peek this time. Not to manipulate. To undo it. One final activation." The soldiers in the room, men and women, hardened by battles, both earthly and not, stared at him in disbelief. One of them spoke, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "We die." Keller's gaze didn't waver. "Or worse," he added, the words hanging heavy in the cabin air. "We don't just die, we lose everything. We forget everything we've ever been, and the wrong one. It keeps what we were." Arguments erupted, a storm of fear and hesitation. They had already lost so much, but the gnawing hunger for an end, any end, was stronger than their fear. The desire to finally silence the whispers pushed them forward, back toward the source of their nightmare. Decades had passed, but the Nevada desert had not forgiven the Horizon engine. As the survivors returned to the facility, they saw how the land itself held a grudge. The air above the sand shimmered, heat waves bending light into optical illusions, mirages of things that weren't there. Rusted fences groaned a mournful song in the wind, and the dunes seemed to pulse with a slow, rhythmic breath, as if the desert itself were alive and waiting. They descended once more into the underground cathedral, the heart of the facility. The Horizon engine was there, waiting for them. It was silent, yet thrummed with a palpable, living energy. Its massive copper spires trembled faintly, and the central sphere, the eye of the machine, hung suspended in the air like a black hole, watching them, judging them. "And this is it," Keller said, his voice shaking but resolute. "The final activation. Once we do this, there are no guarantees we will survive." Wu, sweat pouring down his temples, began adjusting the harnesses and checking the console readings. His hands moved with a frantic precision born of pure terror. The soldiers, grim-faced, loaded their weapons, a futile gesture against the entity they were about to face. Everyone knew a rifle was useless against a shadow that had already slipped through the cracks of reality. And then, it came. The wrong one materialized, not from a single point, but from everywhere at once. Shadows stretched from wall to wall, bending into impossible, geometric angles. Limbs that twisted where no bone should ever allow unfurled from the darkness. Its very presence seemed to devour the light, plunging the chamber into a deeper gloom. The air itself began to vibrate with whispers, a chorus of stolen voices all repeating the same chilling mantra. "This never happened. You will not remember. You will not remember." The fight was less a battle and more a slaughter. The wrong one moved like a storm given physical form, a hurricane of shadow and bone that ripped through the soldiers as if they were paper dolls. Crimson steamed on the cold metal floor, a stark contrast to the encroaching darkness. Screams echoed off the copper spires, their terror mingling with the low, hungry hum of the engine. Keller, ignoring the chaos, scrambled toward the control panel. His hands shook so violently he could barely flip the switches. Wu and the remaining soldiers fought a desperate, losing battle, trying to hold back the tide of shadows that flowed through the very walls. Their bullets passed through the creature with no effect. "Do it!" Wu screamed over the pandemonium, his voice cracking. "Now? Activate it!" Keller slammed his palm down on the final, glowing switch. The Horizon engine roared to life with an unholy scream, a sound that wasn't just metal and electricity, but the sound of reality itself tearing apart. The copper spires bent in on themselves, folding into impossible shapes. Light didn't just bend, it shattered into a million glittering shards. In the center of the chamber, a portal opened, but this wasn't a doorway to 1998, or to any time they recognized. This was something else. A swirling vortex of a color no human tongue had a name for, a shade of absolute nothingness. Inside, Shadows twisted and writhed like smoke given sentient form. The wrong one shrieked, a sound layered with all the voices it had ever stolen, a symphony of lost souls. It lunged, not at the engine, but at the last survivors, trying to drag them back from the precipice. They had no choice, there was no going back. One by one, Kalawu and the last few soldiers hurled themselves through the portal. A final, desperate leap of faith into the unknown. The wrong one followed, shrieking, clawing at them, its shadowy tendrils grasping for purchase. For a fleeting moment, as the chamber and the engine vanished behind them, they thought they had won. They thought they had finally erased their mistake. Then they landed, and the hope died. The desertway was gone. The sky above them burned a sickly, indescribable or a bruised purple-green that pulsed with a faint, nauseating light. As far as the eye could see, blackened, barren plains stretched into an infinite distance. And across this wasteland, shadows moved, dozens of them, hundreds, all identical to the wrong one they had just fled. Keller's knees buckled, and he fell to the soft, strange ground. A terrible, soul-crushing truth washed over him. "We haven't gone back," he whispered, the words choked with despair. "We haven't erased it. We are inside it." They hadn't traveled through time. They had traveled through the creature itself. This wasn't a different timeline. It was its home, its dimension. The wrong one no longer needed to hunt them. They were already in its belly. Time itself seemed to fracture here. The air was thick with the smell of old iron and ash. The ground beneath their feet was soft yet unyielding, like walking on a surface of coagulated blood. Every step they took, every breath they drew, echoed as if it were being swallowed by the sheer wrongness of the place. "Woo!" screamed. He pointed at his own shadow, which had detached from his feet. It stretched impossibly, rising into the sickly sky, twisting and contorting until it formed a perfect, duplicate, wrong one before his very eyes. The soldiers who had fired their rifles now held useless chunks of metal, their weapons powerless against the shape-shifting horrors that now surrounded them, born from their own silhouettes. Keller sank to the ground, defeated. Tears of utter desolation ran down his sunken cheeks. "We didn't fix anything," he sobbed, his voice breaking. "We only traded places. We are trapped. Forever." One by one, the survivors were consumed. Some were absorbed by the wandering shadows, their forms dissolving into the darkness. Others simply faded, their bodies dissolving into the very air, leaving only the faint echo of their voices carried on a non-existent wind, repeating the creature's eternal whisper, "This never happened. You will not remember." Decades later, back in a world that had forgotten them, a torn journal was found half buried in the Nevada sand, right where the facility had once stood. The final entry, written in a frantic script with what looked like blood-tinged ink, was a final, desperate warning. "We didn't fix the timeline. We only traded places, and now we are trapped, in a place where the wrong one was born, forever." Above ground, the world moved on, blissfully unaware. People argued about corporate logos they remembered differently, about famous movie lines that had changed, about childhood memories that didn't quite line up with history. The Mandela Effect persisted, a subtle, creeping virus spreading through the collective consciousness of humanity. No one ever knew the truth. No one remembered the scientists, the soldiers, or the sacrifice they made. No one remembered the scars they left on reality, because it's not what you think, it never was. And somewhere, just beyond the veil of our reality, in a world made of shadow and stolen memories, the wrong one waits, and it remembers everything. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the unknown. If you enjoy exploring the strange and unsettling, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next story. Follow me on X at Don't Drink That One. Listen to my podcast for full content, anywhere you podcasts, at Don't Drink That. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember, ... don't drink that.